G'day and welcome to episode 13, unlucky 13 episode of Let's Get Fiscal, the official podcast of the Australian Employment Party. My name is Ian Dooley. I'm here again this week with Tim Jones. How you going, Tim?
Very well, thank you, Ian.
And just as always, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you want to find out more about the Australian Employment Party, go to australianemploymentparty.org. You can search Australian Employment Party on Facebook to catch us there and see more about the party. And you can also join up on the website, so there's a Join Now button. So if you like what you see, come into the Facebook group and check us out and see what we have to say. Then you can go and join up. We're up to about 85 members and we're trying to get to 500. So we can register. So if you like what you're seeing, you like what you're hearing, come and join up. You can also, if you have some more questions about the party or you're not quite sure yet, feel free to private message me on Facebook or DM Tim on Twitter. His Twitter is at fourthleft2 and mine is at Ian Dooley. That's IAINDOOLEY. And also if you're tweeting about stuff related to the party, just use the hashtag OzMMT. That's OZMMT. Okay, thanks Tim. What's going on in the news this week?
Well, I think that we have a little discussion earlier, try and sort our minds about these things, and I think we came up with the word mess. Everything seems to be a great big mess.
Yeah.
We've had a double dissolution, and then so that Malcolm Turnbull's ended up with a great big mess that It's got all sorts of elements that are going to be very entertaining, but not very constructive for Australia's future, is it?
Yeah, and you were mentioning David Leyonhjelm, who was formerly, the most out there of all of the senators, now has some competition in the form of Malcolm Roberts.
It was hilarious this morning. I think Malcolm Roberts actually passed Barry Cassidy his business card on camera. And then confronting Barry Cassidy, saying, "Give me some proof about climate change." There's no proof. Everybody was talking about tin hatters and all that sort of thing on Twitter. It was hilarious, and of course this guy, I don't know, he spent way too much time on his own. He still thinks that he is the arbiter of all things, and he can speak on all subjects because he's thought about it.
Yeah, right. And it's funny, having an opinion or having thought about something or read some sort of pseudo-academic article that someone copied and pasted into a post on Facebook or forwarded by email, that constitutes an opinion in Parliament these days.
Well, that's right, and it's part of our actual policy platform too, isn't it? It sort of relates to dogma and so on, how we deal with how government would deal with issues and so on. We don't. If somebody has an opinion, then that's fine. They can have that opinion, but once they start wanting to put that opinion over everyone else, then that's not necessarily how we roll, is it?
So the wording that we use is that the government is an ethical authority and not a moral authority, and I think the common thread with a lot of you were sort of talking about that you'd been hearing the likes of Cory Bernardi would be then voting in line with these kind of even further unhinged, if it's possible to get further unhinged than Cory Bernardi. New senators from One Nation and the like, that they're kind of going to be voting in line with each other. And the common thread really is that they're very emotional, they're very morally motivated, they're very ideological, very dogmatic, and they're very opinionated, but not very prone to actually doing research or...
No, they have no respect for others. I mean, this is where, I hate to say it, but onanistic, solipsism is where you only believe that whatever is happening is all that's happening. The whole world revolves around you,
right.
and whatever you feel is all that's important, and so on. And we've got a lot of this in politics. We had it with Tony Abbott, of course, but now we've got lots of little mini Tony Abbott's.
Yeah,
to deal with.
Mini or Maxi, I don't know. They're sort of they're taking it to the
nothing
max,
but the best. Absolutely nothing but the best for the Australian public. It's fantastic.
So I think that's the common thread, and that's why we feel quite strong. I mean, like this whole mess of the minor parties, and then we talk about it, and then we're throwing another minor party into the fray, of course. But
Oh yeah.
really,
sorry, Australian public.
Sorry, Australia. But I think the whole point is that we want to bring a voice to politics that is pragmatic, that's not ideological, that's not moralizing constantly and telling people how to live their lives. As long as it's ethical, and as long as people are treating each other with respect, that's really all that should matter.
And it's not about us. It's not about our personality.
It's not about our personality or us or our opinions, or that we think this or we think that. It's like, well, here's all this academic research that says this, or here is this, a peak body of an interest group in society that's produced this document that says how policy should relate to them, and that should then be used as the basis for political decisions, not this populism of like, I think this. If I can get enough people, whip enough people into a frenzy who also think this, then that gets me into this position of disproportionate power.
I think Australians are really getting sick of this stuff. Anyway, on to our second topic. I think we were talking about, let me see now, was it privatisation? We were going to go on to that. With the NAPLAN, Birmingham, like private schools, that sort of thing that seems to be... I don't know. Do we want to spend a minute on that?
Yeah. So you were mentioning that Bill. What's his name?
Birmingham.
Birmingham.
Yeah. He's the Minister for Education now.
Minister for Education. I should really know that.
Yeah.
So you were saying that he is bagging out schools because NAPLAN tests are going down or something.
Yeah. Well, like the Killock Gonski, and now they're saying, the results aren't good enough. And honestly, you know what I mean.
So he's sort of saying, the results in public schools. So is this moving to a rationalisation for saying that we should not have state-funded schools because private schools do so much better?
Well, I think that, like I saw a graph this week, and it turns out that the private school students are funded at least twice as much as public schools. At least twice. I would go to say as 3 times as much as a
Which
I
don't think many people are aware of that.
No. Well, like, why wouldn't the Labor Party tell us about this? Why wouldn't they tell us? Honestly, don't start me.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one because, in our economic policy, we talk about the fact that the government should really nationalise any private monopoly because there's no advantage in competition when there's a monopoly. But education is not a monopoly. It's not a natural monopoly. People have the choice. They have the capacity to change schools. And so, it's much less of a monopolistic institution than, for example, a highway or communications infrastructure. So, we would argue that you shouldn't have, mandatory nationalisation of schools. But by the same token, the education of our children is a very core part of the national interest. So I think that having it as a profit-making private enterprise is probably not a good idea.
It really throws a funny aspect into everything, this profit motive. Everybody, like when I was involved with the March Australia, like we were organising marches when Abbott first came in, and so on. We wanted to make protests about various things, and then the only thing that people really got interested in the whole thing, I had hundreds of people involved, and everybody had an opinion about the money.
Right.
And this is what I found again and again and again, is everybody has an opinion about money, but the broader issues, like getting back to schools, that basically every child citizen deserves an education. Like, where is that mentioned anywhere in our, mainstream media or our national forum? What are the rights of each? You're born into whatever family you're born into. Surely you have a right to escape your servitude. Anyway, we don't need to spend too long on this one. The next issue was
I think the important thing I wanted to cover off on there is that the conservative opinion is that we should be I guess the neoliberal opinion is that we should be letting the free market decide everything. Yeah. Often the far left or even moderate left political opinion is that we should defund private schools. I don't think either of those things is true. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have private schools funded by the government. But I don't think it's reasonable to have them funded differently from state schools. I think we should have more funding, firstly, right? Like, they had a big report, the Gonski report. It was a major blueprint, academic, research, evidence-based. Let's adopt it. Pay the money, do whatever it takes. And, that it's not an issue with the government that can create dollars to do whatever it takes to get the best possible education for our kids. Then, if people want to form a private organisation or an association on top of the state funding to do something differently, which would require extra funding from the parents, there is no way that's a bad idea. Like, that's great, fantastic, go ahead and do it. I think that the only thing we would say that is for things that are really critical like that having them as profit-making corporatized entities, it really is to the detriment of the outcomes for the students.
Well, you'd think so, and it's certainly a very, very big conversation. So, look, I'll just go on to an uplifting point, about Indigenous dads this week.
Oh man, this is fantastic. So initially the Bill Leak cartoon that came out that was just massively racist, and this is a great opportunity for us, I think, to give people another look at our approach. What's very important about this podcast is that we want to be showcasing our approach to policy development through these policy frameworks that we've developed.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
The big thing that I hear, from people about these racist cartoons is, oh, you're just a left-wing crybaby. You only care about free speech when it agrees with you, and now you're upset because something came out that you don't agree with. Do you hear that?
But it's very interesting that Indigenous dads, #Indigenous dads, was not trolled successfully at all. I got a couple and I resisted commenting to it because it's such an uplifting thing. And it seems that what it represents. I had somebody question me about it today, saying, "What's this Indigenous dads thing about? What's it? I don't get it." And I said, "Well, look, if you imagine being a black man, an Aboriginal Indigenous Koori man, or in Australia, and all you get is negative press, all you get is slander, all you get is people looking down your nose, and then there's no counter argument." So I think that the Indigenous dads was a counter argument to the slander,
right? Yeah.
that Bill Leak put out there, and it's not. It was something new. I think there was really some really quite, excuse my joyous tweets about this. I don't throw that word around.
Yeah.
But they were really, really pleased that these people are proud of their children and proud of their lives and proud of the fact that because within any how do you call it, societal subsector or whatever, you always have bands of success. People at the bottom end who are struggling, people who in the middle they're doing okay, and at the top end they're doing all right. Like we had an Aboriginal model this week. She's just going great guns. She's been having all sorts of trouble too, but it's a real sign of progress. And why do you want to pick on a whole group of people? And you think like glass houses, there's a lot of I don't know. I think you need to step in here because because I really, really feel passionately that they should be, so many people want to just pick on somebody.
Yeah, well, so I mean, the point about Bill Leak's cartoon really is that it's a massive, aggressive, offensive, racist stereotype, and it was directly related to the Don Dale revelations on Four Corners. And anyone who had any doubts about that could look at his defense that he wrote in the next day, where he said that if you think things are pretty crook, that was his words, for kids in detention in Northern Territory, then you should look at the homes that they came from, which is utterly offensive, like even more offensive probably than the original cartoon. And so there was no doubts about his motives and his meanings. So what it's really saying is that the responsibility that they should pull their socks up, these blokes, you know?
Yeah.
And then their kids wouldn't end up being tear gassed and tortured from the age of 10 if they pulled their socks up. And
it's simplistic stuff. Like people have said to me, well, why would anybody spit on somebody? Well, you're not that person who's been treated like this their whole life.
So it's sort of saying it's this sanctimonious, really kind of facile attitude of saying, well, if I had been in this situation where, like, you know, I was systematically oppressed, excluded from the economy, put in jail when I was 10, you know, my dad was put in jail, that I was from an area of extreme disadvantage, there was no economic opportunity, there was chronic social problems, that I would be better than that, right? Like that's what Bill Leake's saying, is that I would be better, I'm a better person, and if I was in the same situation, I would be better than them. And so that's why it's so goddamn offensive.
Well, it's privileged white males. Like I was on Twitter today criticising privileged white males, you know, older white males, and I got a couple of tweets saying, well, you know what you are, don't you? I said, yeah, I know what I am.
Yeah.
I know what I am, but I'm not. But I'm actually, like, what do you call it, a low status white male, and it's not like you know, I don't want anybody to send me mail feeling sorry for me. But you know, like, there are some rich white males that run the place, and I don't think that Bill Leake is doing it that hard.
No, well, he lives in Kilcare, and I live near Kilcare, right? And let me tell you a little bit about Kilcare. They had a photographic exhibition recently. It was about a year ago, funded by a diversity grant, right, to celebrate the diversity of the area. And every single photo was of a white person, and not even that. It was so funny. It was really hilarious.
Oh God, okay, all right.
And not only that, but they were almost all old white people. So I was just like, okay, that's where Bill Leake is coming from. Right?
Yeah, it's great.
So to have this white guy from Whiteville slagging off the situation, you know, in a different state, in a different world to him. That's why it's so offensive. Now, the free speech thing is interesting because people are like, free speech, you know, the left wing doesn't like free speech when it doesn't agree with you. The free speech does not entitle you to be to say things without criticism. It doesn't entitle you to say things without consequences. It doesn't entitle a newspaper to print something that is offensive to a whole range of people or that is unethical to a whole range of people, because it is unethical, because it makes things harder for Indigenous people when a mainstream newspaper perpetuates those stereotypes. It's not the right forum to have those conversations. Now, we can say that within our framework, it is unethical, and it's perfectly acceptable to complain to the Press Council, you know, to complain to the Australian and say you shouldn't print that kind of thing. That's not restricting Bill Leake's right to draw the cartoons. The cartoons are not contraband. He's allowed to be racist. He's allowed to have an opinion, a racist opinion. He's allowed to draw racist cartoons and put them on his wall. And when people come around to his house, he can say, look at this is what I think of black people. He's allowed to do that. But we are also allowed to criticize him for that. And
he doesn't need to feel comfortable afterwards, you know.
Right, exactly. And the government is allowed to restrict what type of things are printed in mainstream media. In order to avoid unethical outcomes for sectors of society. That does not amount to censorship of free speech. It does not amount to violation of some fundamental right. So, you know, I just wanted to make that clear, that within our framework of moral versus ethical, it is okay for someone to feel racist or be racist. It's not okay for a very prominent mainstream newspaper to print something that is libel and slander and detrimental to the progress of an already disadvantaged sector of society.
Well, that's right. I mean, you know, like, I have very strong views about sport and religion. Right. And, you know, like, I know that I'm going to upset people. I try to be careful about it a little bit. I think that most people would be very upset about my views about sport and religion. and I put them in the same category. You know what I mean? Like, sport is religion. Yeah, you know, and religion is sport. So, anyway, look, how are we going to end this?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, that's a nice segue into the final thing that I wanted to mention today is that we do have this real opinion about, the only thing we have an opinion about is how we should form our opinions. And it's, the Australian Employment Party doesn't currently have any formally adopted policy. It has policy frameworks, and that those things are going to guide how we make policy. But you and I are still the interim steering committee. There is no formal national executive. So we're in early days, and so we're still at a nascent stage where people can have the opportunity to help us form those policies. And I've put up on the forum an idea that I have about how we can form the national executive. You and I have chatted about that, and ensure that we have proportional overrepresentation of minority groups in order to ensure that their interests are adequately represented in politics, because at the moment they're not really. So that's the one thing, is forming the national executive with an overt focus on diversity, but also and people can read about that on the forum now. And then there's also the approach to policy development, which is that we can look around for research or policies that have already been developed, either by special interest bodies, peak bodies, think tanks, academics, and we can look at them through the lens of our policy frameworks, the social, foreign and economic policy frameworks, to analyse them and see how they fit within our own, and also other minor party policies. We want to work with other minor parties to bring their policies to the fore.
And it doesn't have to be that complicated, does it? I mean, it's a bit like knowing anybody. You get to trust their approach.
That's it.
And then hopefully people learn to trust our approach.
And people can take part, So if you're interested in that side of things, if you're interested in getting involved, in those policy discussions, we don't have a national executive, so we're not adopting formal policy yet. We only have policy frameworks. But we have a framework for discussing policy, and we have a forum for it. So it's AEP, that's Alpha Echo Panama, .freeforums.net. And anyone can sign up and be a member, and there's a whole category structure there, so you can see what types of policies. If you've got any suggestions, just put it in there in a new topic or whatever. You can post without being moderated. So I invite anyone who's listening who's interested in that kind of thing to come along and check us out.
Great stuff. All right, time to go.
Okay, thanks Tim. I'll see you next week.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.